In the gray quiet of a Midwestern spring morning, the town of Winona, Minnesota was just beginning to stir. It was March 31st, 2023, a Friday like any other, the kind that vanishes into memory without consequence. But for 26-year-old Madeline Kingsbury, this would be the last time anyone saw her alive. Maddie, as she was known to her friends and family, was no different from millions of young mothers in America. A mother of two, bright, capable, dependable, a researcher at the Mayo Clinic. Her life was carefully structured around early mornings, daycare drop-offs, and long shifts filled with purpose. Her future was lined with plans, some small, some grand, but every one of them depended on her being here. That morning, she and her children's father, Adam Fravel, dropped their 5-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son off at daycare shortly after 8 a.m. According to surveillance footage and daycare records, both parents were present. Maddie appeared calm. There was no visible tension, no red flags, just another morning in their co-parenting routine. They returned to her home on Madrona Drive, a quiet residential stretch tucked beneath bare trees just beginning to bud. Maddie was supposed to log in to work remotely by 10 a.m. She never did. At 10:15, her phone went dark. Her co-workers tried to reach her. Silence. Her family texted her. No response. By that afternoon, the first signs of something wrong had started to flicker, small but persistent. It was unlike Maddie not to show up for work. It was unlike her not to answer her phone. It was entirely unlike her to vanish without a word, especially with her children still at daycare, awaiting pickup. By evening, concern turned to panic. Her sister, Megan, called everyone she could. Friends, neighbors, Maddie's colleagues, then eventually the police. Officers responded to Maddie's residence. Her car was still in the driveway. Her wallet, keys, jacket, and phone all inside. But Maddie was not. There were no signs of a break-in, no forced entry, no struggle. But something felt deeply, immediately wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't wait for evidence. Adam Fravel told police he'd last seen Maddie that morning. He said he took her minivan after they returned home and ran some errands. When he came back, she was gone. No note, no trace, no witnesses. He claimed she must have left on foot. But that theory fell apart under even the slightest scrutiny. Why would a young mother leave behind her car, her phone, her wallet, and her children? She wouldn't, and everyone close to her knew that. Winona police escalated the case. A missing person bulletin went out. Flyers circulated. Social media ignited. What began as a quiet concern quickly grew into something much darker. By the next day, volunteer search groups were combing local woods and hiking trails. Helicopters flew overhead. Drones scanned the Mississippi River bluffs. Search dogs were brought in. And within 48 hours, nearly 2,000 people joined one of the largest missing person searches in Minnesota's recent history. And still, no trace of Maddie. The only thing they found was silence. But in that silence, suspicions began to take root. Why hadn't Adam joined the searches? Why wasn't he speaking to the media? And why did Maddie's family, the people who knew her best, refuse to even refer to him by name? The last morning had come and gone. And with it, the life Maddi Kingsbury had so carefully built. Her home, her career, her children's routine, was collapsing under the weight of a question no one could answer. Where was Maddie? And why had she never come back? The hours after a disappearance are crucial. Every passing minute closes a window. Evidence vanishes. Tracks fade. Memories become unreliable. And yet, in Maddi Kingsbury's case, what unfolded in the days that followed her disappearance only deepened the mystery. Winona, a town nestled between the Mississippi River and rolling hills, quickly transformed into the epicenter of one of the most extensive search efforts Minnesota had seen in decades. On April 1, 2023, less than 24 hours after she was reported missing, law enforcement launched a multi-agency investigation. But it wasn't just police. Nearly 2,000 volunteers turned out with flashlights, maps, and boots. They scoured ditches, riverbanks, fields, and forests. For her family, every second mattered. Her sister, Megan, was one of the first to use TikTok to tell Maddi's story. Her short videos spread like wildfire, generating over 500,000 views, bringing national attention to a case that, without social media, might have stayed local. The story gripped millions. A beautiful young mother, a quiet town, no witnesses, no clues, only a feeling that something terrible had happened, and someone knew more than they were saying. Maddi's father, David Kingsbury, told the press she would never just leave her children. Never. Anyone who knows Maddi knows that. Something happened to her. As the media frenzy grew, so did public scrutiny, particularly on one man, Adam Fravel, the father of Maddi's children, the last person known to see her alive, and the one who, according to police and family, wasn't cooperating. While law enforcement continued to examine security camera footage, digital footprints, and phone records, something strange began to emerge, or rather, something failed to emerge. Adam didn't join the search parties. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't plead for Maddi's return. Instead, he remained quiet, withdrawn, observed but not involved. Online, frustration turned to fury. People began digging through his past. Old social media posts, shared photos, hints of a troubled relationship. Then, an affidavit surfaced, confirming what Maddi had allegedly told friends in the weeks before her disappearance. Adam had threatened her. He had choked her. He had told her, disturbingly, that she would end up like Gabby Petito if she didn't stop talking. It was a chilling warning, one that could no longer be ignored. Investigators widened their search. They began to analyze Adam's timeline more closely. GPS data from his phone, his vehicle movements, surveillance footage across town. And that's when a 45-minute gap was discovered. A period where Adam's whereabouts were unaccounted for. A gap where something could have happened. A window for something to go terribly wrong. Searches began to zero in on remote areas, wooded trails, abandoned farm roads, and culverts far outside of Winona. Cadaver dogs were brought in. One allegedly alerted to a shovel found in a vehicle connected to Adam. It wasn't enough to charge him, but it was enough to keep the pressure mounting. Still, no Maddi, no body, no confession, no evidence that pointed definitively to anyone. Just the overwhelming silence of a case that seemed frozen in time. A mother gone, 2 children left behind, and a growing fear that justice might never come. Then came the letters. In mid-April, Maddi's family began receiving anonymous messages. Typed, mailed, and cryptic. Some suggested she was still alive. Others claimed knowledge of what happened. Investigators took them seriously. Fingerprint analysis, postal tracking, and linguistic profiling were initiated. But the sender was never publicly identified. The letters stopped just as suddenly as they began. By May, weeks had passed. The search scaled down. Volunteers returned to their jobs. Maddi's children, now staying with her family, were too young to understand the gravity of what was happening. But their mother was still missing. And Adam Fravel, while not charged, had become the center of an unofficial storm. Police, meanwhile, kept building their case quietly, methodically. They weren't ready to arrest anyone. Not yet, but they were watching. For over 2 months, Maddi Kingsbury's disappearance cast a shadow across southeastern Minnesota. Her face, smiling, vibrant, too young to be gone, had become a haunting fixture on missing persons posters and Facebook timelines. Her name echoed through local news bulletins and national headlines. And yet, despite the outpouring of support and near-daily efforts by volunteers and law enforcement, one question remained unanswered. Where was Maddi? That answer came quietly, on the morning of June 7, 2023, nearly 10 weeks after she vanished. Just outside Mabel, Minnesota, a town of less than 800 people nestled near the Iowa border, a Minnesota Department of Transportation worker was clearing brush along Highway 43 when something caught their eye. A small, narrow culvert, partially hidden beneath overgrown weeds, seemed off. Within it, wrapped in a tarp and hidden from view, were human remains. Law enforcement was called immediately. The area was sealed off. Forensic teams arrived by afternoon. Though no official announcement was made that day, investigators already had a strong suspicion. The location was just a few miles from property connected to Adam Fravel's family. Remote, secluded, easily missed by a casual passerby, but known well to someone familiar with the area. DNA testing would later confirm what everyone feared. It was Maddi. The discovery shattered any lingering hopes of a different outcome. Her family's worst nightmare, the one they had dared not say aloud, was now a reality. Maddi Kingsbury had not walked away. She had been murdered and buried like garbage in a culvert. Within hours of the discovery, Adam Fravel was arrested. He was charged with second-degree intentional murder. The press release was brief but damning. Law enforcement cited a pattern of escalating violence, gaps in his alibi, and forensic evidence that linked him to the disposal site. The very same site authorities noted that he had never once mentioned during the search efforts. At his arraignment, Fravel appeared gaunt, silent, emotionless. He pleaded not guilty, but investigators had been building a case for weeks. The evidence they had gathered painted a portrait of a man whose relationship with Maddi had turned dark, volatile, and dangerous. Court documents revealed that Maddi had been planning to cut ties with Fravel permanently. She wanted full custody of their 2 children. She had confided in friends about his abuse, the choking incidents, the threats, the control. She told her sister that she was afraid, that she was preparing to leave. That decision, investigators believe, may have cost her life. It's believed that on the morning of March 31st, shortly after dropping the children off at daycare, Fravel confronted Maddi at home. What began as an argument turned violent. Maddi, just 5 feet 4 inches, had little chance against him. He allegedly killed her, possibly with blunt force, then wrapped her body, loaded it into a vehicle, and drove over an hour away to a rural culvert he knew well. It was here, beneath layers of brush and mud, that he tried to hide what he'd done. But he failed. The investigation into Maddi's murder was now shifting from a search for a missing woman to a pursuit of justice. And as authorities built their case, the community, still reeling, turned its grief into action. Blue porch lights lit up Winona and surrounding towns in a campaign called Light the Way Home, a symbolic act of remembrance and a declaration that Maddi's story would not be forgotten. But behind the public displays of mourning was a deeper, quieter devastation. 2 young children, now motherless, family broken, a future stolen. Maddi Kingsbury had done everything right. She had worked hard, loved her children, tried to leave an abusive partner, reached out for support, and still she was silenced. Now it was up to the courts to ensure she would be heard. And the justice system did come through. Adam Fravel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called the crime deliberate, cowardly, and driven by control, reminding the courtroom that the act had robbed not just a mother of her life, but 2 innocent children of their future. Maddi's sister Megan delivered a gut-wrenching impact statement that brought many in the room to tears. "You didn't just take Maddi from us," she said, facing Adam directly. "You took away the light in our family, the safe place for her kids, the person who gave more than she ever took. You didn't just kill her, you tried to erase her." Outside the courtroom, news crews lined the steps. Strangers left flowers at Maddi's former home. Her children, now living with Maddi's parents, were too young to understand the full weight of what had happened. But one day they will, and when they do, they will hear the truth, unfiltered and unsparing. The story of Maddi Kingsbury didn't end with a verdict. It continued through the advocacy her family began shortly after her disappearance. Megan and her parents started a foundation in her name, dedicated to supporting families of missing persons, funding search and recovery efforts, and pushing for faster responses in early disappearance cases, especially in domestic violence situations. Winona, once known for its quiet bluffs and riverside charm, now bore a scar, but it also held a legacy. Maddi's disappearance united thousands in purpose. Volunteers who had never met her spent weeks combing forests, spreading flyers, and showing up when it mattered. They weren't just searching for a missing woman. They were demanding a better world for people like her. And perhaps most haunting of all, this could have been prevented. There were signs. There were red flags, but like so many cases involving coercive control, emotional abuse, and isolation, the danger was invisible until it wasn't. Maddi Kingsbury was 26. She was a mother, a sister, a daughter, a friend, and a victim of the very person who once stood beside her at the daycare drop-off. Her voice was stolen, but her story won't be, because here on Trace of Evil we remember the victims. We expose the hidden dangers, and we speak where silence once lived. If you found this story important, share it. Someone out there might be in Maddi's shoes, and your voice might be the one that saves them. Until next time, this is Trace of Evil, where the shadows are never empty, and the truth always finds its way out.